So today I'm going to go ahead and go over my World War I helmets that I have. With better lighting this time, hopefully. See if I can get this to focus. There we go. Now, to start off, on the left here, I have two British made. I did identify the company that made this one, but I can't remember the name of it right now. Originally, this helmet, when I got it, which was probably over 7 years ago, it was painted silver. Now it does have a liner. It did have a liner. I still have it. It fell out, and I had to cut it out because I was removing the paint, the silver paint. It was a really glossy silver paint that was on it. The more I think about it, the more I'm wondering if maybe it was a parade helmet, possibly, because in the front here as well, you'll see there's an eyelet hole that's been stamped or punched, well, not stamped, punched in by something. Nothing was in it when I bought it, if that I remember. It was so long ago, I can't remember. I'm going to go ahead and grab the liner for a second, but it's not in the best shape. When I purchased it, I believe, well, I didn't purchase it, my parents bought it for me. It was one of the first things I ever got when collecting. It was probably around $20 at an antique store. Now, what remains of the liner isn't much. As you'll see, this is what's left. It does have the top felt pad, and some of the, I believe they're either wood or some sort of hard rubber that are inside the leather bits here, the part of the liner, have fallen out, but I still have them somewhere. They fell out from here because the leather on this side started to decay. I did at one point try and apply something, it's called saddle soap, and what it does is it returns some of the natural oils that were once held in the leather to help moisten it. But I'm probably going to have to do that multiple times, maybe per week or day, if I ever want this to get close to what it was like. See, now it has all the oil paper. This is all original. The netting, the leather. The only thing that was missing on this helmet was most of the chin strap. Most of the chin strap was already gone. I only have a little piece in this bag still. And someone had obviously taken this liner out, which reaffirms what I thought for it maybe being a parade liner, because what was holding it on in the middle here, on the top, was a brass screw, flathead, and a nut on the underside, which was holding this up against the top of the helmet. Now, the underside inside the dome was not painted, just the outside and under the rim, well, the edge of the rim, around here. It was a little pitted on the inside, and I'm going to repaint this one as well again, because this is all acrylic paint, and it's too bright a shade. This is the same paint I painted one of my Schluter shells with and a liner for my World War II stuff, but I'll get into that a different time. Stamped HS 155, and you know it's a British one too, other than me finding the company and finding it to be a known British company. It has about a 2-inch, well, inch and a half maybe, seam. The seam crosses over about an inch and a half, and for the chin straps on the bail, they have split rivets. Now, only British helmets have that inch and a half cover for the rim and split rivets. This helmet I bought for $35 at a flea market. It is also British. It still has the top rivet and the side rivets and the bail. The rim's in a bit rougher shape. But I will say, you can see it on this one. I'm going off a little bit here from this helmet. You can really see it on this one because I depainted it. Just the way that this was formed and made, and most likely, to my understanding, mostly all helmets were made in a sort of hydraulic press, where the dome would be pushed out by some sort of die to form the rest of the shape, and then the rest of the helmet process would go on, so on and so on. But you can see the way that the metal was formed and rolled out by that die and the hydraulic press around the sides. I've always thought that was pretty interesting. You don't see that with M1s or anything else either. Maybe Japanese helmets, you can see it mostly, well, usually anyways, if the paint's worn thin enough. This one did not come with a liner, but it is also British, as you can tell by the seam, which goes over quite a bit, and if that wasn't enough, there's split rivets. This one's in a bit rougher shape, but for the buying a helmet in 2018, how prices are on the rise, $35 in my opinion wasn't bad, and I don't have many of them. And for some reason as well, in my location out here, there's not many antique stores, and if there are military things at any of the antique stores that are around here, the price is marked up way high, and if it's something that you might think about getting, might not, it's gone the next day. So $35 for this is good in my book. Now the stamp is visible, if I can find it, along the rim here, but you can't make it out. I haven't yet, at least. Can't quite remember. Oh, there it is. I'm not going to be able to see it, I doubt it. But if you can see that little indent line right there, and then you can see some sort of numbers. This one might be, I'm not sure if this is British or American. Except, I mean, the split rivets would give it away as British, but considering what the heat stamp looks like that I can see, because I can see it better with the camera, it looks more similar to an American heat stamp, but anyway, I'm going to have to put some more research on that. And lastly, this is one of my prize jewels, I guess you would say, of my collection. Is a World War I German Stahlhelm that I picked up at an antique store for, well, I didn't even pay for it, but about $75, I believe. Now, there is no way of telling what model of Stahlhelm this is, M1918 or so on. The only way to identify a World War I German helmet is by the style of liner, and this one did not come with one. I'm pretty sure it was also tampered with because the liner's not in here. And not only that, but when you have rivets, because the rear rivet is missing, and they're loose, it means that most likely they were taken out post-production, because when these rivets were put in, they were hammered in, and they're split rivets. Of course, you could always blame it on the fact that the liner isn't there, and there's not enough material behind those rivets to keep them straight. But when these rivets were put in, they were most likely more or less red hot, so the second they were put into these helmets, they'd stay exactly flat, be very tight on the helmet, and make sure that liner was going nowhere. Evidence of tampering is that these are bent and loose, as well as the back one being missing. Both of these rivets are that way. Now for $75, I don't even think this was bad whatsoever. It's missing the chin straps. It's a bit rusty on the inside, probably because up in this area up top, I don't know how these helmets were painted, and I don't know why this one is black. I'm pretty sure most of them were green, but it most likely wasn't painted very well in the dome piece. To my understanding, most helmets weren't, because that paint wasn't necessary, at least in the First World War from what I've seen. I'm not quite sure. This is just me assuming. you wouldn't need to paint the inside. There would be no point to it, except for maybe the rim, so you don't want any reflections coming off the back. Well, when I say back, I mean this. Because you can at least see that in the German helmets because of, I suppose you'd call it a neck piece or a cover almost, because this would be for protecting the back of the neck and the rest of the head mostly, which is why these helmets are, well, the design for these helmets has been copied throughout history because it works very well for protecting the head. Now the paint, it's black. I mentioned this earlier, and I'm not sure why. And this is also a German one as well. I just want to make that clear because there are Hungarian models of the German Stahlhelm from the First World War and second even. The way you can tell the difference is the placement of the chin strap rivets on, I think it's Austro-Hungaria. At least it used to be. I'm not quite sure. My world geography isn't that up to date. When they produced them, when they made these foreign copies of the Stahlhelm, the rivets were placed, I believe it was either further up, near the rim around this area, so where it starts to curve down to the actual rim of the helmet. This, I consider this the rim of the dome. They would be much closer up there. Either that or it was they were further down. I can't quite remember right now, but just know it's all about the placement of the chin strap rivets. In general, though, I think that this is a pretty interesting helmet, you know, with your Frankenstein bolts, which are, some people don't know what they're for, but they're air or vents for the soldiers so they don't overheat. It's the same with World War II German helmets. They have these, but they're not far out like this. It was just more of a luxury for the helmet and the wearer, I suppose, just to make it more comfortable and whatnot, which a lot of, that's what military gear is really. Effectiveness and comfort and utility. But anyways, well, actually too, you can also see where this was pressed in the die a little bit, like I talked about with the American, or British helmets. How it has the curves from the metal and steel bending when it was pressed in a die. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, and I've mentioned it already, I know I have, I'm getting a little off track here, is the paint. Now, I believe this is relatively old, as the rust is bleeding through. You have rust bleed, which happens when the layers of the paint thin and any amount of iron dioxide or rust attaches itself to the metal and then will start to rust the helmet inside out underneath the protective layer of paint. Air usually being the accelerant for that. Well, that's how things rust, and weather. And you can tell, well, it's not, I'm pretty sure it's not artificially aged due to the fact that the rust is all under the paint and is starting to bleed through, like I said. Now, I don't know why this would be black. I don't know if they painted them black originally, because to my understanding, they were painted probably green or maybe a brownish color, because from research I've done on the British doughboy style, is that they were painted originally, the M1917s, these, were originally painted a more of a tannish brown color, one could say. Not green or olive drab. I haven't done too much research into these, so I'm not quite sure if that's accurate or not, but I believe it is. What I've assumed with this helmet is that it also might have been used for parade, not in the First World War, but in the 30s and up to the 40s. I've seen plenty of photographs and historical footage and archival footage of the Third Reich and Germany under Hitler's reign, during the 30s, this was the style that you would see mixed in with, one could say that you'd see this throughout the entirety of the 30s and then 40s until 45, of course, of helmet mixed in with the M35s and M42 Stahlhelms. But mostly, I've never seen these in combat footage. I've seen them in parades. And they are painted black, usually. A nice glossy black for parade purposes. Now this is, of course, isn't glossy. But you can assume that it might be because of the patina and its age. Now I'm not quite sure. That's just an assumption. But I also think, although I would say I don't want to believe it or not, but I'm having trouble getting used to this camera thing. Sorry, I'm not looking through it. I'm actually looking at the helmet. So you probably haven't gotten a good view on most of these throughout the video. Anyways, with the paint, in some points, I've noticed, I believe that I do see brush marks, and you can see right there, there's something, probably used to be there, or some, maybe a decal, something over the paint, because there is a line and marking. You can see that in the reflective glare. I think that on this paint, I believe it's original, like I said, but I'm pretty certain it's original. But if I remember correctly, when I looked at it at one point, there was some, I'd almost call it pitting, or, well, not pitting, but gouges of, say, when you look at something that has paint on it that's peeling and then you paint over it, there's a divot from the lack of the paint being underneath of it. You'd have to fill in that gap. I've seen that underneath this paint. Now that might just be because as it rusts, because there is rust bleed, and it's rusting under the paint in a good amount of area. It's just from the rust, but I'm not quite sure. Anyways, if anyone who watches could tell me or give me opinion on that, or whether or not you think that this one is British or not. But that's probably going to be up to me once I look at that heat stamp. I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching the video, whoever does. Expect some more coming up really soon. And that's all. Thank you for watching.